I've been testing two disc-equipped aluminium road bikes from the direct sale giants Rose and Canyon, and we're going to put them head to head. First up, the Rose Pro SL Disc 2000. Aluminium frame, 105 group set, RS 505 hydraulic levers, Mavic wheels, a lovely bicycle, and it costs £1,197 10 pence at the time of this video. Next, the Canyon Endurace AL 6.0 disc, which also has 105, also has RS 505 levers, has DT Swiss R24 spline wheels, and a similar spec overall. It is almost exactly the same price at £1,199. As you can see, two very similar bikes, very similar specs from similar companies, both of which will turn up in a box at your house for you to turn a few Allen keys and ride. The Rose has a very lovely aluminium frame. It comes in both black and red. Obviously you should choose the red because it looks amazing. And what I really like about this frame is that from a distance it essentially looks like carbon. It's got very lovely smooth welds. At the bottom bracket it's a little bit coarser, but around the seat cluster and the head tube it's a really, really well finished frame that looks amazing for the money. I reviewed the rim brake version of the Pro SL for Bike of the Year 2017 and I absolutely loved it. I gave it 5 stars. It's a great bike. My one criticism of that bike was actually that it was a relatively firm ride. With the Pro SL disc, they've made it a tiny bit more comfortable. Now, I'm not actually fully sure how this has happened. I think it's partly to do with the fact that there's no brake bridge across the seat stays, which means that there's more compliance in those stays because they can flex more. Also, you get slightly bigger tyres and slightly wider disc rims, Mavic Axiom discs instead of Mavic Axioms. On the tyre front, it's worth noting that my test disc bike had 25s on it, like the rim brake one, but they now spec 28s according to the Rose website. Of the two bikes, the Rose is the slightly racier one because it's a little bit shorter in stack up front. This small test bike came with a very short 90mm stem, which I swapped out for a longer, deader one for my testing because it was not comfortable for me. But otherwise, it is a racier shape than the Endurace. The racier shape is reflected in the personality of the bike. It feels a little bit harder edged, a little bit less kind of relaxing as a bike to ride, but I really, really like the Pro SL. Obviously it doesn't hurt that the bike looks great, but it comes together in a package that is genuinely quite comfortable, and while it doesn't have that kind of amazing earth-shattering race bike stiffness, it never feels in any way lacking when you're cranking it up a climb or something. And they've been very generous with the gearing, so you get a compact 50-34 chain set and a big 11-32 cassette, so you can pretty much spin up anything. The Pro SL is the slightly heavier of the two bikes. It comes in around 9 kilos for a small, and that's probably partly to do with the wheels, which are a bit heavier. There might be a little bit more weight in the frame, but I wouldn't swear to that. There aren't really any holes in the spec per se. The RS 505 levers, which are on both these bikes, are, in my opinion, hideous, but they work really well. They give you the same quality of hydraulic braking as Shimano's much more expensive levers, and the shifting is fine. It's maybe got a touch more throw than Dura-Ace or Ultegra, but you can't really complain about it. It does work really well, and Shimano's cranks are lovely. They always do the job. Overall, I'm a huge fan of the Rose. It looks great. The spec is really good. I think if I was going to criticize one thing, it would be the tyres. The Vittoria Zafiro Pros are fine. They're sort of middle of the road kind of rubber, but they aren't really a patch on the Continental GP4000 S2s that you get on the Canyon, which are just one of the best tyres you can buy. That won't matter for most of the riding that you do, but that one time you're cranking up a ridiculously steep, muddy climb that your BikeRadar colleague Jack Luke, who's a dickhead, made you ride up, you will regret the fact that it doesn't have the best tyres in the world on it. So the Rose does everything well, doesn't really have any major faults, but what about the Canyon? The Canyon Endurace AL Disc 6 is the disc version of our 2017 budget bike of the year, so it's safe to say that it's going to be quite good. The qualities that made the rim brake version of the Endurace good have very much carried over to the disc version. Again, you are lumbered with the world's ugliest brake levers, and again, they work really, really well, as does everything else on the bike, which is almost exactly the same kit as you get on the roads. Now, Canyon does make one that isn't black, and you should definitely buy that. They do quite a nice blue finish one. It's not as eye-catching as the Red Rose, but it's much more interesting looking than the boring black test bike that they've sent us, really, honestly. You do get Canyon's own finishing kit, which is fine. It's perfectly adequate stuff. It's maybe less distinctive than the Ritchie kit on the Rose. I guess my only complaint would be, while you do get a sensible length stem on the Canyon, the bars are quite wide for the size of bike. The size small had 42cm bars, and they go up from there, and they're quite fat wrapped bars, so it even feels quite big for a 42. It's worth a note on sizing with the Canyon, because the disc version of the bike is actually slightly bigger for a given size than the rim brake version. So if you're jumping from one to the other, do check that the numbers still work for you, because it gets longer when you put discs on it. Proportionally, the Endurace is as it ever was, and it's a less aggressive bike than the Rose. So if you're looking for a more kind of cruisy sort of fit, it's probably the better choice of the two bikes. The Canyon is the lighter of these two bikes. It's about 200 grams lighter than the Rose, which in the real world is a totally trivial difference. Yes, if you're a hill climbing weight weenie, that might matter to you, but honestly, don't worry about it. The really key thing with the Endurace is that, like the rim brake version, it has best-in-class ride quality. At this price level, you're very likely going to be tempted by cheap carbon bikes, and I will say for the umpteenth time that a good aluminium bike always beats a cheap carbon bike, every single time. Cheap carbon often has quite a wooden, sort of dead quality to it, and it's not necessarily any lighter than aluminium. This is pretty much cutting-edge aluminium. It's a really, really nice riding frame, and it's worth a try. To forestall the deluge of angry YouTube commenters who've just spent this amount of money on a carbon bike, I'm not saying that cheap carbon bikes are bad, but that generally speaking, you do get more for your money this way, and the Canyon Endurace is a really good aluminium bike that doesn't have to apologise for its frame material. The fact is, it's a very comfortable bike that has that liveliness that sets great bikes apart from just good bikes. I need to be clear when I talk about frame stiffness and liveliness that this is not saying that the Endurace is going to ride like an S-Works tarmac or something. It doesn't have that kind of totally unyielding stiffness when you apply pressure to the pedals, but what it does have is a kind of springy quality that makes it a really engaging ride, and it backs that up with really nice vibration absorption, so it's not a bike that's going to beat you up. And this being the disc version, which has quite large tyre clearances, you get loads of plushness from the rubber it comes with. The 28mm Continental tyres that it comes with are great. They are one of the best tyres in the world anyway, and they actually measure up considerably larger than their nominal 28mm size. I think they're over 30mm, so you're really getting loads of comfort built in without any modifications to this bike. You might be able to tell that I'm quite enthused about both of these bikes. The Rose kind of fills me with excitement because it's a really good bike that looks quite special for its price tag. And the Canyon excites me because it's just an exceptionally good riding bike for your money. Honestly, you won't be disappointed by either of these bikes. My heart says go for the Rose because it looks so much better. But if it were my money, I think I would have to go with the Canyon despite my reservations about minor things like the width of the bars. I do wish both of these manufacturers would do the decent thing and put mudguard mounts on their bikes, because while these are great all-rounders that have braking that works brilliantly in all weathers, you're still not going to be able to mount mudguards on them in a particularly elegant way, and it seems like a bit of a waste on bikes that have such large clearances not to take advantage of that and turn it from like a good general all-round road bike into an amazing all-round commuter do-everything bike. To stoke a little more controversy, while I think that the brakes on these bikes are brilliant, I would recommend checking what the current prices are on the rim brake versions of these bikes. At the moment, the Canyon is particularly cheap. It's £819 right now, which is an amazing deal for the spec. And if your riding doesn't really happen in all weathers, if you're pretty much a fair weather cyclist, I would strongly consider going for the rim brake one because it is a bit lighter, it rides just as well, and it is considerably cheaper. Either way, disc or rim, Canyon or Rose, these are tremendously accomplished bikes that won't disappoint.